Hello there, everybody. How's it going? Just thought I would join everybody on YouTube today for another question and answer session. Don't mind the microphone. It's just better so I don't have to shout. So hope it's not obstructive or annoying for anybody. Okay, hello everybody. So basically this is a forum for you to ask any questions about astrology that you might want to ask. I do ask that you, as much as possible, refrain from asking questions about your own horoscope. Basically, anybody who asks questions about their own horoscope, you're asking me to give you an answer, which is just going to be a vast generalization. I may do it upon occasion, but I want you to understand that it's really just something very general. And in doing that, you're asking me to give you something that's only like 50, 60% accurate because I'm not looking at your full horoscope. Okay, so the reason I refrain from that is I don't want everybody to go away believing things about their own chart that may or may not come true. And so that's why I tend to not do that for people. So hello, everybody. How's it going? Somebody's saying job timing. Job timing is, it's rather complex. You have to look at both the Rashi chart and the Dashamsha chart. And I generally tend to use both Jayamini dashas and Vimshottari dasha, and then a precise system of transits in order to try to narrow it down to a 2 or 3 day period of time. And in order to really tell you how I did that, I would have to do a video probably for about 3 hours. Okay, so I can only give you a general answer to that. All right. So Shravana Nakshatra as final dispositor. Well, for people who have Shravana Nakshatra as the dispositor of all their other planets, their intuition is going to be very important to them in all circumstances. They're going to watch, observe, listen, tune in order to navigate their way through life. Can the Ayanamsha one uses affect the nakshatras that planets fall in, or does Ayanamsha only affect dashas? No, Ayanamsha can affect nakshatras that planets fall in because it depends on which planet you're talking about, or if that planet is at the edge of one particular nakshatra, it can have that particular result on the planet, okay? Ayanamsha can affect a lot of things. Let's see what else we have here in our questions. Okay, somebody's asking, Venus in Swati Nakshatra, does Venus Dasha promise good, especially when it is in the 12th house? In order to answer that question, you have to look at how Venus is in all of your Varga charts, and you also have to look at Rahu's dispositor in all of your Varga charts, and in order to understand the well-being of Rahu, because in those areas of life that Venus is weak or Rahu's weak, then you're going to have problems in those areas. And in those areas of life where Venus is strong and perhaps Rahu's dispositor is strong, then you can have a lot of benefit even if it is in the 12th house. There can be some sacrifices, but you can have benefit. So a lot of it is dependent upon the placement of the planet, the well-being of the dispositor of Rahu, the well-being of Venus, and that's going to be different in every single Varga chart. Okay, so let's see some other questions that we have. Somebody's answering, does using tropical for signs and sidereal for nakshatras affect the Mahadasha and other calculations? Tropical zodiac does not affect the nakshatras or Vimshottari dasha at all, because what happens with that, if you're using sidereal nakshatras, then the dashas are going to stay the same, but using a different ayanamsha for the nakshatras and also a different calculation for the nakshatras, which I do, can also affect the dasha periods. But it's not the tropical zodiac that's affecting the dashas, because the dashas are formed by the nakshatras, which are sidereal. Okay? Let's see what else anybody else is asking. And so if I'm quiet, I'm being quiet because I'm looking at people's own particular questions here. Okay. Okay. What good can come from debilitated planets? Well, a debilitated planet, if it's in the 10th house, not the 8th, but if it's in the 10th house, can still accomplish quite a lot. But quite often people get into the whole thing of Nietzsche Banga and talk about debilitation getting canceled, which, a debilitated planet can function strongly if its debilitation is canceled. But if you're in the dasha of that particular planet that's debilitated, you're still going to confront the debility of that planet. Okay? Okay, somebody's talking about planetary war. So let's talk about planetary war for a moment, because people tend to calculate planetary war in a very general manner. They just look at the horoscope, they see if those planets are within 1 degree of each other, and they go, these planets are in planetary war. But basically, it's not meant to be calculated that way. It's meant to be calculated based upon local space. People got a little bit lazy in that particular capacity because of the intensity of calculating things like that from Surya Siddhanta. And so people got lazy, and just rather than trying to go through the intensive calculations, which recognize that's very difficult if you don't have a computer, they tended to just go, okay, if these planets are within 1 degree of each other, then they're in planetary war. But if you have ever looked at a conjunction between 2 planets in the sky, like if you've looked up at the heavens, perhaps when you've heard that there's going to be a conjunction of Venus and Jupiter, and you go, wow, I want to go outside because I'm going to see those planets right next to each other, and you go out to the sky and you see that they're like this far apart, you kind of go, well, I thought they would have been closer together. That is a perception that's based upon where you are on the planet, something called local space. So basically, things like planetary war and also combustion have to be calculated as per local space. So you can't just say these planets are within a degree of each other, so there's going to be planetary war. So basically, planetary war between any 2 planets can be difficult, and the planet that loses in that planetary war is going to have some of its energy drained by the other planet. Okay, so let's see what else we've got here. Okay, so questions like, so please pardon me, questions like if ascendant Lord Mars debilitated in 9th and aspected by Jupiter and Venus, how will it be? That's just a very broad question about your horoscope that I can't answer with any level of accuracy. So I'm going to tend to stay away from that, okay? Rahu in 7th in Pisces, Jupiter in the 6th house. So when Rahu is in the 7th, relationships can be difficult. The focus becomes very deeply upon the other individual. Also, that's going to mean Ketu is in the 1st. And when Ketu is in the 1st, people who have Ketu in the 1st generally feel uncomfortable around other people because they tend to be very self-controlled. They're afraid that other people might be watching them because they intensively watch other people. And so since they watch other people that intensively, they think that other people are watching them with the same level of intensity. And so it creates for some discomfort in relationships. If you can be aware of that, you can have more successful relationships. So, okay. Let's see what else we get here in people's questions. Mars in Kritika, how a person directs their energy with this particular nakshatra. Well, whatever Mars relates to in that chart, you're going to have to be very forceful, and people may not see you as being very tactful in regard to that particular planet, but it's better to be honest and pure than it is to be watered down and somebody else that you're not in relation to that area of life. So you have to find some balance between those 2 things, okay? How is the 2nd, 12th relationship between the Atmakaraka and Machakaraka in Navamsha? What does it signify? Also, when they are kindred from each other in Navamsha, that can signify any number of things. So I'm not going to go into that because also I'd have to take into account where they are in the Rashi chart. I'd have to see what houses are connected with all of that. And that's too general, so to speak. Okay. And again, somebody's asking another question. If Rahu is positioned in the 12th conjunct the 9th lord, is it good or bad in terms of wealth? That depends on your horochart chart and your Chaturtamsha chart and a lot of other factors in your horoscope, not just Rahu being positioned in the 12th conjuncting the 9th lord. Okay, that can be a very spiritual position though, right? If you can learn to surrender to things that are going on in your life. Thank you for saying thank you for the live sessions. I do really appreciate that. Okay, let's take a drink while I read some more questions. Somebody says, if Saturn and Jupiter are exactly opposite each other, who would exert more power? That's going to depend on the overall well-being of each of those planets and who is influencing each of those planets. If that planet's under a lot of duress, it's not going to be strong. If that planet is not under a lot of duress, it's going to be stronger. Somebody says a dead planet is useless. No, some planets you want to have dead, right? If it's a planet that's creating, let's talk about the fact of something called the Lajatati avastas, which tend to be prevalent mainly in the Rashi chart. And there's, let's say, for instance, if you have the sun starving a planet, right? Let's say the sun is starving Venus. If that sun is dead, the level of its starvation is not going to be as pronounced, right? So some things we want to have dead. And what a dead planet generally signifies is a planet whose karma is exhausted. Where dead planets become frustrating is if we want those dead planets to accomplish something that they're not going to be able to accomplish because of residual karma left over from previous lifetimes. That's just a generalization, though. Is Venus in Kritika bad for marriage? No planet anywhere is bad for anything in and of itself. Okay, I know some of you may read things in, simple postings by other people, but no planet in and of itself is bad in and of itself. It depends on other factors in the horoscope. Okay. I can't give you anything too general about an interpretation of Venus in Ketu in Purva Palguni in 7th for Aquarius ascendant, mainly because I don't know the well-being of your Venus. I don't know what degree it's at. I don't know anything about Ketu's dispositor. Ketu's dispositor would be the sun in this instance, so I don't know much about your sun. So I can't really go too into depth with that, okay? Okay, let's have some more general questions, please, people, in regards to horoscopes, not horoscopes, more general questions in regard to astrology, because a lot of you are getting into your own personal horoscopes and you're asking me to give you answers to questions that are going to be vast generalizations. And really, with some of these, I don't feel comfortable doing that. Okay. Let's see what we've got. Planets are generally conjunct each other when they're in the same Rashi. Okay, that's how you want to qualify that in terms of actual conjunctions as per Parashara techniques. I don't think that people should try to tamper with, making their child born on a specific day. Somebody was asking me that. Ashtaka Varga, somebody's asking about Ashtaka Varga. Ashtaka Varga can be very important, especially when you're wanting to know how difficult somebody's Sade Sati period is going to be, right? If that, if Saturn is getting good Ashtaka Varga, when it's transiting the positions from the moon, then it's not going to be as difficult for Sade Sati, okay? Relationship of nakshatra dispositor with transiting planet and ownership of transiting planet. You're making my head spin, I have to say. I don't understand your question. I'm trying to be polite. If you could just please, clarify what you're asking. I'll see if I can get to it. How does Saturn in Uttara Bhadrapada nakshatra work when it's with Ketu? All right, so let's consider that we might have a fairly strong Saturn. And it's in Uttara Bhadrapada Nakshatra. Uttara Bhadrapada Nakshatra people can be very passionate, but when it's with Ketu, they may be a little bit authoritative in their passion, right? Because they have a need to be an authority figure. Okay, that's just a generalization. Okay. Basically, the person who's asking the question about relationship of nakshatra lord with a planet transiting and ownership of the transiting planet. You have to take one of those things at a time. So if a nakshatra lord is being transited by a planet, that is obviously going to have some impact upon the nakshatra, right? And I don't understand the ownership of the transiting planet. Okay. Please don't be harsh here. I can't answer everybody's questions, so if you are not happy that I didn't answer your question, then, sorry, okay? I'm here, answering your questions for free, so please don't give me a hard time with that. I have a question that's pretty out there, so I understand if you choose not to answer this one. With all the progression, space exploration, should a baby be born on Mars, how would astrology behave? Right, that is a bit out there, okay? All right, I'm not going to go into that one. People get like really intense in terms of retrograde planets and think that retrograde planets are bad. But if you think about it, right, when a planet is retrograde, right, it's not going to be behind the sun. It can't be combust. It also gets really stronger. It gets much stronger Shadbala because of it being retrograde. Right? That's something called Chestabala. So actually retrograde planets are very strong and they can be very positive. They're not always there to wreak havoc and create difficulty. I think people kind of make too many generalizations about retrograde planets, okay? So retrograde planets can be good. Don't give them such a hard time, right? You can't make generalizations about anything in astrology. And I know that we all like to go to learn astrology. When we're learning astrology, we kind of look at those cookbook astrology methods and we go, oh, wow, that's fun to play with. But they don't always bear accuracy, like about a good 50% of the time. And so it's important to understand that. And the same goes with retrograde planets. People get into saying retrograde planets are bad, but those people who are saying that, they're not really thinking it through, because a retrograde planet is going to have strong Chestabala. And so it can be a very powerful planet. It's not always negative. It's more internalized, but it's not negative. Does Venus-Jupiter combination bring fame? No, not always. It depends. It could bring a lot of vanity for an individual. It could bring a combination of being able to understand how to work well with the material world while also being spiritually astute. But if you're in Venus-Jupiter dasha, then what you're going to find is that Jupiter gets starved by that Venus, right? One's making so many decisions about their material life in relation to whatever Venus and Jupiter, whatever Venus rules, rather, that there's difficulty in terms of the more spiritual perspective on whatever Jupiter rules. But then Jupiter will always give its benefit in that particular capacity to Venus, right? Because Jupiter would be creating something called delight for Venus. Okay, let's see what else we've got. Does retrogradation cancel debilitation? No, a debilitated planet is a debilitated planet, and a retrograde planet is a retrograde planet. It's people who get into saying that something cancels something else, you're not really thinking things out. Are Bhava Chalita charts important? Bhava Chalita charts can be very similar to house cusps, and I tend to use house cusps, right? Okay. Okay, let's see some more questions here. Somebody's saying, I feel like sidereal calculation is very precise and logical. However, in terms of predictions, tropical reading seems more accurate. Why that could be from logical point of view. Each person's going to have a different perspective on that. For some people, I'm going to say this, for some people, they find a sidereal zodiac works better. For some people, they find a tropical zodiac works better. What's most important is the astrologer's relationship to their techniques and the client's relationship to the astrologer. With that as something that's strong, then either one of those is going to work well for the consultation, right? So that's, I think people getting into all this, like this one works better, that one works better. I think we need to leave that argument behind and just accept that each person gravitates toward a different thing because they find that with the techniques that they're using, something gives more accurate results, okay? And I'm going to duck my head while, you know, people from both sides of the camp are deciding that they're going to throw things at me, okay? So. Does a seventh lord in a Dushtana house give bad results from spouse, especially when it is placed well, like in 12th house Venus in its own house Libra, while Venus is placed in friendly sign? It can mean sacrifices for spouse, okay? How Jupiter in Purva Ashadha works in terms of beliefs and values of a person. That person, if they've got a good solid Venus, is going to be authentic in regard to their beliefs. If Venus is really beat up, that might be a person who is a spiritual dabbler for the sake of belonging to a clique. Okay, that's how I would answer that question. What are good combinations to study astrology? Any combinations are good combinations to study astrology, but find your Atmakaraka, okay? Look at it in the Rashi chart and in the Navamsha chart, right? Look at if you're looking at that Atmakaraka being in an odd sign, count forward. If you're looking at that Atmakaraka as being in an even sign, count backwards. Look at the second, third, and fifth from the Atmakaraka. If K2 is in one of those positions, that can give a lot to the individual being an astrologer, okay? So another 9 or 10 minutes. And before I get into any further questions, just a reminder that I do have some approaching courses. If you're enjoying these videos, I am teaching a foundation level course on Vedic astrology that starts next spring. Also an extensive course on the nakshatras. Both of those courses are going to be about 44 weeks long. If you want to register before early December, then you get a 15% discount on both of those courses. There will be a link down below in the video if you wish to avail yourself of that opportunity or just read up more on it. While you're there, please feel free to visit my astrological services page, okay? Let's see what other questions we have here. It's not just a debilitated planet in the 10th house in the Navamsha, and it's not just about it having special meaning. When the planet's debilitated in the 10th house, even if that planet is debilitated, even if it is not quite as strong in other capacities, it can still be a productive planet in terms of what it rules due to being in the 10th equal house, okay? But it needs to be the 10th equal house, right? That's the answer to that question. Okay, so just a few more minutes. How important is to check from the moon, the 7th house, especially markers like Rahu, Sun are in the 7th house? You have to look at your full horoscope in balance. The moon is going to relate to your perception or your sensory look at the world around you, because the world relates to manas, or our consciousness, whereas the ascendant is something that's different. Right? So you may perceive things to be one way with the moon. Things may be concretely in a different way in association with the ascendant. Different ascendants work in different manners, okay? That's probably the easiest way to say that. What if 3 or more planets are debilitated in the Navamsha chart? It depends on what you're asking a very broad question. It depends on what those planets are associated with. Okay? So again, what I would, in helping people broadly with astrology, one thing I would stress to you is don't become prone to cookbook techniques. In other words, this planet here always creates this. This planet there always creates that. These two planets interacting with each other will always create this, because it doesn't. Okay, you have to take into account so many different factors. And that's why I don't get too deeply into that. Okay. So somebody's asking, here's a good question. So somebody's saying, which combination of planetary placements would you definitely see supporting permanent long-term settlement? So here are some things. Let me kind of explain to you the factors that give foreign residence in the first place. If you have a self-related factor, like the ascendant, or the Lagna Lord, or the Atmakaraka, or the sun, interacting with a foreign country factor like Rahu, or the seventh lord, or the planet being in Cancer, or more on a weaker level, being in the 12th or being in the 9th, or on an even weaker level, being with the 12th or the 9th lord, that can create the body being in a foreign country. But then you also want to see fourth house related factors interacting with a foreign country factor. So fourth house related factors, the fourth house cusp being in Cancer, or the Lord of the fourth being with the seventh Lord, or the Lord of the fourth being in the seventh house, or weaker, the Lord of the fourth being in the 12th or the 9th, or with the 12th or the 9th Lord. That places the home in a foreign country. Pardon me. So you want to have both of those factors in the Rashi chart and in the Chaturtamsha chart, both. Okay, those things can create foreign residency. Sometimes you can find it if one or two of those things are missing too. Now, in order to see if that individual has a complete break with their home country, you want to see fourth house factors interacting with eighth house factors or 12th house factors. And that can show a complete break from one's home country. Okay. All right, that's an answer to that question. Let's see what other questions we have here. I probably have time for one more. If somebody wants a good remedy for Hasta Nakshatra, well, first of all, let's ask if you're having any problems about Hasta Nakshatra, because you may be having problems with Hasta Nakshatra and you may not be. But a good mantra for Hasta Nakshatra would be, I'm going to bring it up for us here, my Om Jam, Jham, Om Jam, or Om Nyam, Nyam. Om Jam or Om Nyam are two really good mantras for Hasta Nakshatra. Okay, so let's see, maybe one more question. So seventh lord in 12th house can be foreign spouse. Seventh lord in 12th house can also be a spouse that one makes sacrifices for. Seventh lord in 12th house can also be separation from spouse, or a spouse who is somewhat aloof. Planets in certain positions can mean so many different things, and you have to fine tune it and take it in balance with the other Varga charts, which is annoying as it might be, because I know everybody likes to get free assessments of their horoscope. That's why I don't go into all those free assessments of the horoscope, because in a lot of those circumstances, it's not going to bear out. So that's why if I do anything, I do it in a very general level. Okay. The reason when people keep asking about Pushkara and Navamshas, the reason I don't keep I don't answer that is because I work with nakshatras in a completely different way. And so basically, I tend to not even work with that because I just generally don't have a need to do so because I'm judging strength in a completely different manner that I find tends to override that particular concept. So that's why I tend to avoid those particular questions. Somebody's asking me if I have Jeshta moon. No, I do not. Okay. All right, I'm going to stop there for this week, everybody. I will try to come back on sooner rather than later. Please feel free to visit my website if you'd like to schedule a consultation with me. Also, you can visit about my upcoming courses. So again, you know, I probably won't go too deeply into Pushkara and Navamshas and things like that, people, because I tend to not really look at things like that. I know a lot of people work with those things and it works really well for them, but I do a lot of things based on the Baladi Avastas and Jagradati Avastas, and that helps me to get a greater level of clarity. So, and that's why I tend to avoid that. All right, so I will talk to everybody next time I'm on. Bye now. Take care of yourself.